Carol has just asked me to go through a few housekeeping points, which I'm happy to do. Although members of the public are allowed to attend and observe in limited numbers, we are recording the meeting and a copy will be uploaded onto the authority's YouTube channel. Some of the presenters will be contributing to the meeting remotely, namely Neil Harris and Alison Kennett from Ernst & Young, and Maggie Gibb and Selena Arlock from Internal Audit. To facilitate a diary clash of Neil Harris, the chairman has agreed to take items 8, 9 and 10 before the internal audit reports. In order to facilitate the best possible experience for all those participating in the meeting, can I please ask those participating in the meeting remotely to switch off their microphones and cameras when not speaking, otherwise they will be visible in the recording of the meeting if they do not do so. If remote participants wish to speak during the meeting, please turn off their camera to indicate you wish to respond to a question or make a comment. Finally, members will be aware that, on the basis of legal advice received, the internal audit report on the Blue Light Hub post-project evaluation will need to be considered in the exempt session. The chairman has therefore agreed with the internal auditors that this report will be taken as the last item of business. I'll now hand over to the chairman.
Thank you, Graham. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you're going to enjoy this meeting. Lots of interesting material. Hope you can take it all in, and it's lots of paperwork, so we'll all try and be patient with each other this morning. So Katie, apologies.
None, Chairman.
Minutes, any observations on the minutes of the last meeting? Anybody? Getting shakings of heads? None. Matters arising, previous minutes? Anyone at all? Asad?
Yeah. Yes, so in terms of there's an action in relation to an information sheet, members will be aware, I requested me at the last meeting to produce an information sheet on the asset management system. The Director of Finance and Asset was planning to present that today on the basis that the red kite audit that's taking place will also be completed. So there's currently a process mapping red kite audit that's taking place. The field work of the audit has been completed, but yet the report is to be finalised. So we're requesting that we move this action to the next O&A meeting so we can present the information sheet and the findings from that audit at the same committee report, if that's okay with the committee.
Okay. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, Graham.
Chairman, yes, I'm happy to provide an update on minute 0827. At that previous meeting, I presented a report about concerns, compliments and complaints, and a question was asked by a couple of members if the apparent spike in complaints may be attributable to the COVID lockdown. I reported to the committee that I didn't have the figures to hand, but I undertook to provide more detailed information to the two members that requested that information, which I did by email on the 16th of December. And put shortly, there were only 2 complaints that appear to be directly attributable to the COVID-19 pandemic, and these were 2 allegations against individual employees for alleged breaches of COVID regulations in their personal capacity. Neither of those complaints were found to be have any grounds whatsoever.
Comments? Okay.
Just to be reassured that they had a letter back and everything was dealt with, so that they've got that in their file, that the complaint wasn't upheld, so that if there's a subsequent issue, they can produce that.
The councillor asking the question was one of the recipients of my email, and I did set out the conclusion of those reports. In respect of one, a complainant, there was a complaint made, and despite numerous attempts to contact the complainant did not make him or herself available to report back in any way whatsoever. So it wasn't possible to undertake an investigation and report back to that complainant. It was an anonymous complaint. And in respect to the other one, that was a matter that was referred to Thames Valley Police. They took no further action.
So okay. There's a letter of comfort for the employees on those matters, that they've got a letter of comfort.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor.
That's where I was coming from. The employees have a letter of comfort saying that there is no further action. That's what I'm trying to assess, so that they can keep that in case there's a subsequent issue that follows on, which is unrelated to the first one.
I don't have that level of detail about whether
No.
the staff were communicated.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Any other questions? So, disclosure of interest. Anybody? No. Questions number 5.
None, Chairman.
Okay, 6, Graham.
Yes, Chairman, this is a regular item. It's in our capacity as the enforcing authority under the regulatory fire safety order. Our investigators have powers to undertake, should they so wish, covert surveillance. This is a report to confirm that no covert surveillance has been undertaken during the last period in which the matter was raised at the committee.
Absolutely. Anything on that? Anything not? Okay, as previously we've been mentioned about, we're moving on to Alison. I believe it's going to come in number 8. Are you right? Neil or Alison, one of the team. Hello, Neil. It's not Neil. It's not him.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair. And thank you very much. So I think thank you for accommodating me this morning. I've been navigating 2 audit committees, so thank you for bringing the items forward on the accounts to now. So hopefully you've got in your pack of papers the audit results report from EY on the Fire and Rescue Authority audit for the financial statements for the financial year ended 31st of March 2021, and also our conclusions on the authority's value for money arrangements. I don't propose to say very much on this report, and hopefully I'll take it as read, but to say that we have now we're now into the final logistics, I think, of concluding the audit. So subject to receipt to your considerations of the final set of accounts today, our audit results report, there are 3 matters that we're reporting as being uncorrected by management, the impact of which are not material. They refer to assets held for sale and extrapolations from our audit procedures. And the extrapolations are based on routine audit procedures and our audit methodology in EY, so don't represent actual errors. They are projected misstatements in a couple of places. And the asset held for sale around the cost of the sale not being included in the valuation in the accounts is again a factual error, but the combination of none of those are material. So therefore, subject to your consideration of the reasons why management are giving for not amending the accounts, I am in a position, once I've received the final signed accounts and the letter of representation, to issue our audit report, and that audit report will be an unqualified opinion on the Fire and Rescue Authority, on the Fire Authority's financial statements. I've also not identified any significant weaknesses in your arrangements for economy, efficiency and effectiveness in your use of resources, which is our value for money commentary. Within 3 months of issuing our audit report, you will receive an annual audit report, and that will summarise our understanding of your arrangements and the commentary of our understanding of your arrangements across the 3 criteria that are set by the National Audit Office. As part of looking at your value for money arrangements, we've looked at your financial resilience, and that's looking at your current budget, medium-term financial plan and strategy. We've done that for purposes of the value for money work, but also the disclosures that will go into the final set of accounts on going concern that looks at a period at least 12 months forward from March 22. We've looked at the final position on the project for the Blue Light Hub. We've looked at how you've responded to the inspectorate's findings and recommendations, and taking all of those matters into account and anything else from our inquiries. As I say, we've not identified any significant weaknesses. It's a pretty clean audit results report from an audit perspective. I think we've been pleased again with the way your finance team have responded to the audit process by way of quality of work papers, explanations and responsiveness to our audit queries, and I suppose accommodating the split visit that we've had as well because of some of our own resourcing constraints in EY. So with that, Chair and members, so I think this has been another good audit for the Fire Authority. Thank you very much to the finance team for all the cooperation and assistance that we've had. In terms of timeframes from here, subject to your view on our report and the accounts, I'm anticipating issuing our audit report on Monday the 21st, so that just allows a little bit of time for final checks of the accounts, there's some additional disclosures that I'm just asking to be added in that are not significant to draw to your attention on the going concern narrative. And then once we get the final letter of representation and signed accounts, my intention is to release the signed audit report by close of play Monday, the 21st of March. I'll pause at that point, Chair, unless I'm looking to Alison to see whether I've covered everything from your perspective, Alison. Yeah.
I would just add to it, the whole of government accounts, we haven't been able to
Yes.
complete that part because we haven't got the instructions out yet. And on your side, your officers haven't got the software in order to produce the whole of government accounts yet. It's just been delayed and we haven't got a date for that yet.
But that's across the whole of that's not just specific to yourselves, that's actually across all of the local audit system at the moment and applies to all local authorities, police, fire bodies.
Thank you. Any questions? Robin?
There's a question of detail, Chairman. The officer has kindly.
Can you speak up a bit? Thank you.
Question of detail, Chairman. The officer has kindly informed us that the information that we would be considering isn't complete, and that there's information that we need to know. So we're considering this report, and it isn't a complete report. Are we able to note it? Are we able to agree it? Because we've already been informed before we look at it that it isn't complete. It might be something I seek advice from Graham on whether that is prudent or proper.
I'll first give Neil House the opportunity.
Yeah, Neil.
To comment.
Neil, do you want?
Yeah.
And then
So thank you for the question. When I say that it's not complete, the only items that are outstanding now are items that are on your agenda today, which you're required as those charged with governance to consider management's response to the 3 uncorrected differences set out in our report. You need to approve the final set of audited financial statements. We then need to receive a signed version of the accounts and the signed letter of representation. We have to perform final checks of those statements ourselves, and then we release the audit report. So there isn't substantive elements of audit work that remains ongoing as I speak now. So just to clarify my point about what's outstanding, that's what I'm referring to.
Thank you for the clarity.
that's fine.
So can I
If you can, yeah.
if I could just add on to that, 2 errors that have been identified. One is for £347 and the other is for £240 roughly. Just to give you an idea, we have a budget of around 33 million. So in terms of correcting those errors, in all essence, it probably wouldn't have changed the face of the accounts because it would have just probably been a rounding difference. So it's quite immaterial. And as Neil suggested, the 51k that they allude to is extrapolated. It doesn't necessarily mean the errors will amount to 51k. It means if the continued same pattern occurred, it could. But what gives us the extra confidence in our accounts is we don't just get externally audited, we also have internal audit. We do our core financial controls on an annual basis, and they look at the same elements, transactions and so forth. And we've been getting substantial for the last 6-7 years. So we're fully confident in most cases our accounts are correct, and these wouldn't have changed materially our accounts to justify us to make that change.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very clear, very accurate. Thanks, that was very helpful.
Have it put out like that and continue to understand. Thank you.
Okay, so noted.
The other recommendation is that the content of the report be noted.
Thank you very much. Thank you, team. Neil. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison, and my team actually, and your officers. As I say, everyone's worked very well together again for the 2nd year I've been involved in this audit. So thank you to all concerned.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Okay, number 9.
Thank you. Good morning, members and officers. Today I'll be presenting you with the letter of management representation for financial year 2021. You notice I provided you a separate document. In front of you, it should be just another letter. There's been a slight change to the document since the papers were produced for this meeting, and we've just responded to the question around the unadjusted audit differences that are found, which Asad's explained the reasons why in there. The letter of management representation itself is a legislative requirement and a self-explanatory paper. The information contained in this letter contributes towards the auditors being able to form their final opinion as to whether the financial statements give a true and fair view of the authority's financial position. This letter is to be signed off by the Director of Finance and Assets, Mark Hemming, and also the Chair of our Committee, Councillor Carroll, following today's meeting. And as Neil was mentioned, this will be signed on Monday, 21st of March 2022. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Thank you for that. I'll put the recommendation, please.
Mr. Chairman, that the letter of representation be approved for signature by the Chief Finance Officer and the Chairman of the Overview and Audit Committee. And for clarity, that is the copy of the letter that's on members' desks. And the copy of that will also be uploaded with the agenda pack.
Oh, sorry, Robin, you didn't see.
Yeah, I was looking through, I do apologise.
No,
You
yeah.
never said it was on the table. I was looking through the paper, but I didn't see it.
All right.
And I thought, well, perhaps it ghosted away.
No way, no way.
But it would be nice to know it was on the table, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that's agreed. Thank you.
Agreed.
Right, number 10, Marcus again.
Yeah, thank you. Today I'll present you with a statement of accounts for year ending 31st of March 2021. The accounts outline the financial activities of Buckinghamshire Milton Authority for year ending 31st of March 2021. It shows the financial details of the services the authority had provided, together with explanatory notes, the resources consumed, and the financial position as at the end of the year compared with the previous year. When putting together the accounts, the authority has followed the SIPA Code of Practice on Local Authority Accounting in the UK 2021, based on IFRS, the code. The accounts are drawn up in accordance with the accounting policies, which are set out in detail with the statement of accounting policies section within the accounts. The responsibility for the proper administration of authority's financial affairs is vested with the Director of Finance and Assets, who is required by law to confirm that the authority's system of internal controls can be relied upon to produce an accurate set of statement of accounts. The accounts contain 4 main sections. Each of the 4 statements is supported by disclosure notes, providing additional detail to the figures presented. The 4 main statements are movement in reserves. This statement shows the changes in the financial resources over the year. The comprehensive income and expenditure statement. This statement shows the gains and losses that contribute towards the changes in resources shown in the movement in reserve statement. The balance sheet. This statement shows how the resources are held in terms of assets and liabilities. And finally, the cash flow statement. This statement shows how the movement in resources can be reflected in terms of cash flow. The accounts also contain information regarding the fire protection fund account, along with a narrative statement which provides information about the authority, including key facts about the authority, the financial performance during 2021, corporate risk, the pandemic, and a going concern review. The auditor's reports will be added to the document before publication. I've provided you with a separate document, which is regarding the going concern review, which will be just in front of you as well. And within there,
Robin, that one.
it's just a single sheet of paper that says going concern review at the top. Yeah.
Thank you for that. It's good to have clarity then.
We're all the same.
And on the back of that, you can see there's 2 highlighted paragraphs, which we've added to the accounts, which just show the changes that have happened since these accounts were produced back in June. Just to give an update on the financial position of the authority in terms of members approving the £5 council tax increase back in the fire authority in February. So just highlighting that difference there. I will now take you through one of the 4 main statements, which is the balance sheet. That can be found on page 4 of the accounts, but I'm not sure what page in your packs. And I'll just go through briefly the movements compared to the previous year. So in terms of non-current assets, there is a 16% decrease in the total non-current assets. And the reason for this is due to Bletchley Fire Station being sold during 2021, reporting Greatholm as an asset held for sale, which is not shown separately in the accounts due to the details surrounding the sale being commercially sensitive. Assets under construction, which relates to the build of the Blue Light Hub that was completed during 2021. And following an independent valuation review, this is now seen within land and buildings. The valuation of all other property has slightly fallen following independent valuations and the market position at the time. And finally, the intangible assets have been fully amortised. further breakdown of this can be located under note 11, 12 and 13 of the accounts. Current liabilities, there was a 22% decrease overall in the current liabilities compared to the previous year. The main reason for the difference is due to a decrease in the short-term creditors on business rates relief grant seen in 1920 but not in 2021. More noticeably, a large decrease in provisions of just over 1 million, which includes the reduction in an NNDR appeals provision and fully utilising the injury pension provision. A further breakdown of the current liabilities can be located under note 18 and 19 of the accounts. Non-current assets and long-term liabilities have increased by 25%. The majority of the increase is due to liability relating to the defined benefit pension scheme. There was a change to the financial assumptions used by the actuary, which included a significant change to the discount rate, the inflation expectations, which resulted in higher value being placed on a defined benefit obligation. This increase is offset by a pension reserve. A further breakdown of the long-term liabilities can be found under note 20, 21, 22, 25 and 28 of the accounts. And finally, on the reserves, the unusable reserves have increased by 27% and the usable reserves have increased by 27% and the unusable reserves have increased by 34%. Both of these can be seen under note 23 and 24 of the accounts. I'm going to stop there and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Questions? Okay, yeah.
My question is about the reserve. And it's absolutely understandable that we have been spending down reserves at a time during COVID, but I wanted to understand how much of the reserves is being used to fund day-to-day activity.
Sure. So in terms of the day-to-day activity, for this current year, we had set aside 1.1 million use of reserves to balance our budget for 21-22. In reality, we're not using any of that because we've seen some underspends within existing budgets. We've had additional funding coming here, and we've also seen some income coming from some rates review that we've carried out. Now that's been reported to the executive committee, so we've not used any of those reserves for this year. Going forward, setting our budget for next year, again, we've set a balanced budget without the use of reserves in terms of our revenue expenditure. In terms of our capital expenditure, obviously we don't get any capital funding from the government. So what we do is we allocate our revenue budget and transfer some of that. And usually it's in the region of around 1.2 to 1.49 million every year that we set aside to fund capital projects.
Thank you.
Robbie?
Yes, just through you, Chairman, seek some clarity. Around human resources, the figures in there drop. And does that mean that we're assuming human resources is going to be employees and the employers and staff and firefighters? It shows that the figure dropped by about 100,000, 96,000. Is that because of recruitment, or have we got less people working for us than we did have at the turn of the year? Because that's quite a notable, that could be senior officer, or it could be a couple of well-needed firefighters. So what some clarity around that figure, because it, one would imagine that we've been pretty busy during COVID and we've done lots of things for other people, which we've probably not been remunerated for because it's a good thing to do. But it just worried me that that figure's dropped. I would have thought at a time like this we should have been increasing human resources, because let's face it, we've been through one of the most, and probably who knows what we're going to be called on to do with the issues across the water. So I think that figure needs some explanation, because I do worry that we haven't quite got the staff we should have.
Okay, so
Can you confirm what page you're looking at?
Page 19610.
sorry, can I just come into that? So I think you're looking at the actual figures for human resources. So there was a budget of 542k and we spent 446k. So there was a variance of 96k. Is that the figure?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so that's based on actuals. Obviously this relates to last year. If I remember correctly, there were some vacancies within human resources at the time that weren't filled. And as a result of that, there was an underspend. That doesn't mean that budget's been removed. That just means actuals for that year was 446k. My understanding now is human resources are fully established and have a full set of team but I'll pass you to Mickey to anything.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely correct. We did carried a vacant post, and we also had someone on maternity as well, so that was like half a post as well. So that was the excuse me, that was the underspend. It was just difficulty recruiting to that position, but we now, as Asif said, we've got 14 in human resources now.
So there's no additional pressure within the department,
No.
and that human resources doesn't include the general firefighters.
No, that is purely the human resource team.
Yeah, it doesn't define. I'm sorry for asking. It's just
That's
that,
good.
No, it's fine.
you know, we need to have clarity around it. So that's more encouraging. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, recommendation.
Chairman, there are two recommendations at page 185. The first one is relatively straightforward. It's that the matters raised by the external auditors be considered. The second one, I think for clarity, should now read at the authors of the report suggestion that the statement of the accounts for the financial year ended 31st of March 2021, comma, with updated pages 16 and 17 in relation to the going concern review be approved for signing by the chairman of the Overview and Audit Committee.
Agreed? Okay, now we're swinging back to item 7. Have you got the papers for everybody in front of us? Have we got A, B, C and D? Robin, you're okay with that?
Always okay.
Okay, so this is Selina. Selina, good morning.
Good morning and thank you, Chair. This paper is to present to members the internal audit reports that have been finalised since the last meeting. These audits are part of the approved 21-22 internal audit plan, which had 7 audits for us to complete, and we have so far finalised 5 of those. We have field work that's still that has just been concluded for asset management. However, the report is still being drafted for the service. There is one audit that's been deferred in agreement with the Director of Finance and Assets, and this is relating to the HR and payroll process mapping review. And this is due to new officers being brought into the service, so we're just allowing them time to settle into their new role. I will hand over to Alex Prestridge, our lead auditor, and he'll talk you through the core financial controls audit, which is Appendix A on page 25 of your packs, and he'll also talk through the HR people management audit, which is on page 41 of the pack. So I'll hand over to Alex now.
Thank you, Selina, and thank you, councillors. So for this year's core financials audit, we omitted the payroll risk area, and they're usually done together. So you'll probably note that as you read through. So we also carried out walkthroughs for each of the risk areas, which were financial control framework, creditors, debtors, general ledger, grant income, capital, banking reconciliations, VAT, and treasury management. So as you can see, we awarded it a substantial opinion, and this was due to the 2 low priority findings. So the rationale behind doing walkthroughs this year was that looking through the last medium priority or higher finding that we had for the core financial controls audit was in 2018-19, and also doing walkthroughs allows us to focus in a bit more on the processes. So as you can see, for finding 1, we picked up something that we may not have found otherwise around user training. So it's great that sort of training records are kept, but in order for them to be of maximum use, they should be reliable. And then around payment plans as well. So again, this affects a relatively small area of what the finance team do, but yeah, so records of payment plans should be kept as well. So I'm happy to take any questions on this audit report.
Any questions? Robin.
Just page 33, whatever it is in the report. Can I have a little clarity around the statement per asset registered as opposed 2021-20 total to I think it's 2/338 to 40081. Is that disposable assets? What's that actually mean? Because it doesn't. I'm having a job. It says fire station at Bletchley. Is that showing what was accrued from selling that asset? Is that correct, or is that not correct?
I can probably answer that question for you. Yeah, so that total there is what we held for Bletchley Fire Station in terms of the asset register and how much we have in terms of net present value of the asset. That's not actually how much we got for the site, but it's how much it was worth in terms of how much we had on that asset register. So it's that figure that's been disposed of and removed from our asset register.
So it's just a figure.
It's just a
figure of value.
Yeah.
And it doesn't relate to any indebtedness thereafter.
No.
It's quite a large figure. That's why.
It's quite a large figure. Yeah.
For clarity around it would be a good thing.
Yeah, well spotted.
Not Bill.
Yeah, fine. Something caught in my throat, Jamie.
Any other questions on that one?
Thank you, Graham.
Graham? Oh, sorry, Ralph.
Thanks, Chairman. Just like to say, I'd like to put on record my appreciation of the quality of work carried out on this internal audit. Going through the report, the detail on financial controls in terms of listing the transactions that were examined and the step-by-step bullet pointing of the process to audit those is very reassuring, and it's an example of a good rigorous approach. So thank you to Alex for doing such a thorough job. Thank you.
And I think that goes for everybody, doesn't it? Thank you for that. Right, Graham?
I think there's another couple of audit.
Yeah, I know. Okay, we've got to carry on then.
Yep. So thank you. So carrying on with the HR People Management Audit Report. So for this audit, we did full substantive testing. So you'll note that the findings obviously do detail the exceptions from sample testing. So for this audit, we looked at the risk areas of policies and procedures, system access, data security and information integrity, starters, levers and movers, recruitment management, compliance, and performance and monitoring. And we awarded it a reasonable assurance opinion. So going down to the findings now. So for finding one, we found a total of 17 pieces of documentation that weren't on file that should have been on file. So so this was in the new for files for new starters. So a notable one was around references, where they were either one reference had been received or no references had, but we also did note that that the team generally did do a good job of requesting references or chasing them up. So it was mainly in cases where they hadn't been received. So findings 2 and 3. So these are ones that I particularly want to focus on, mainly sort of looking at how they might be read. So for the business continuity plan testing log, we did note that because of the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, parts of the business continuity plan probably were invoked, or they definitely were, which is why we sort of expected there to be some sort of record of the test having been carried out. So for finding 3 regarding the open personal data actions, the finding doesn't necessarily state that there are open personal data actions. It's just that they haven't been closed off on this piece of documentation, and there was no other document to state that they had. So the action around this finding sort of involves looking at those actions just to make sure that they have been closed off. So finding 4 was around changes. So again, this was documentation that wasn't on file for changes this time. And the final finding 5, was around monitoring performance indicators for the team, and sort of as a support role for the organisation. So I'm happy to take questions on this report now.
No questions, Robin.
A bit of clarity. This audit report, at the last full firefighting, we had a, never get the name right now, a magistrate inspectors attended the, as constabulary. Is that correct? That's the correct title?
Mm-hmm.
I always have trouble with titles, and never really been big on them. But does this report, the information in this report, have any correlation or aspects in relation to that statement from the inspector? And if it does, is this a positive move towards addressing some of those concerns raised around I think working hours and times and stuff in the letters which were in the correspondence in the public domain? Or has this got absolutely no relation to that at all? In which case I sincerely apologise.
Selena.
Would you like me to answer that? Thank you, Chair. So I will say it is not related to the inspection. This is looking at the processes by which we maintain our records and the approach taken. And again, making sure that the right checks and processes are followed when we do the recruitment and sort of manage our people internally. With regard to the inspection, I just want to, there's a paper coming on later on that does talk about some assurance work. We're going to do that. So that will be picked up as part of our 22-23, but that, just to reiterate, this particular piece is not related to the inspection report.
That's the right question in the wrong time then.
I'll write that down. I'll write that down. Okay. Finished. We're moving on.
Yeah, so I will talk you through the next few papers, Chair. Got quite a few to get through. So Appendix C, which is page 61 of your pack. This is the procurement governance and compliance audit. The audit itself evaluated 6 key risk areas within the procurement process. This is looking at the strategy, policy and procedures, strategic assessment and business justification, delivery project strategy, contract procurement, contract development, and then the performance monitoring and management reporting. The overall conclusion of this review was reasonable, as we raised 5 medium and 5 low priority findings. Just to focus on the medium priority findings, these related to the procurement strategy itself. We've got a finding around the guidance that's available to officers. Again, improvements in terms of records for financial improvement limits, as those were up to date and not clearly communicated in terms of current procedures, and contract performance monitoring has been identified as well as an area. And lastly, the KPIs, so the performance indicators for the procurement team. I wasn't going to go into any particular details within the findings, but I'll pause there for any specific questions you may have relating to those findings.
Any particular questions? Ralph.
Thanks, Chairman. I guess the question is, can I have more explanation? Because in the audit report on contract management, there didn't seem to be a lot of strong evidence. And I mean, I thought the examples that appeared quite weak, because the management response was, this isn't the sort of thing you would monitor anyway. So is this an appropriate audit? Is the audit fit for purpose for this activity, or is there something going on around fire authority work which is different to the Buckinghamshire Council, where the auditors tend to get involved and have ongoing contracts, like looking after adult social care, that sort of thing?
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering about the appropriateness of that audit review.
Selena.
So I suppose that the audit largely focused on the strategy and the procurement guidance and the process that we have. What we did do is sample 5 procurements to make sure that they had followed that process and that journey accordingly. There isn't in terms of how we do it, if we reference the council, Buckinghamshire Council, making reference to adult social care, for example, there's the detailed monitoring of the contract itself. So we haven't gone into the detailed contract monitoring and management of contracts. It was overall more focused on the procurement process in terms of this audit. We can audit contract management. There will be different controls for contract management because that will be detailed and limited to a specific contract. But this audit did not take that particular approach. However, if something that is deemed a risk for the authority, we can certainly do that for future audit plans.
Robin.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Could I possibly have a little bit on figure 8, the KPIs? It's a very small note against that performance indicators, and also on page 75, bottom column, fundamental weaknesses identified. If I could have a little bit explanation, because it's a short note in there, following Councillor Bagg's point about detail, which is always a good point to raise. They are short notes against it. A short explanation around those two would be really great for you to see. So I understand what you're saying. I'm sure what you're saying in there is compliant and correct, but it's a brief note.
Yeah, it's all set out. Okay, so just a quick explanation.
So shall I start off with finding 8, which is on page 73, relating to the KPIs. So that particular finding is that we don't have adequate KPIs for the service. And I think because of the support with a number of procurements, it'll be useful to have measures in place and have those documented and then adequately monitored. So that's the finding around that. And then in terms of limited, page 75. So in here is a definition of what we would give an assurance opinion on. And what we've tried to say is, for us, that an audit opinion is subjective and is based on our assessment of risk. And should we find that the material weakness is in a control framework and we're not assured that the authority has adequate controls to manage risk in a particular system, then we'll deem it as limited. And that is the rationale around it in terms of that note. What we have, these are quite standardized now in terms of SIPFA, because I'm not sure if you recall, 2 years ago, we brought this back to ensure that our rating and our opinions is aligned with other authorities and what SIPFA guidance is. So there is consistency that should we benchmark with other authorities, we are sort of risk rating this in a similar approach. We can see how other control frameworks and other authorities appear, but I don't know if that was a clear enough explanation of that definition.
Yes.
Thank you for the explanation. I'm still probably quite cloudy on it, to be truthful, because it's another statement of which supports the previous statement. Okay. What I am unclear is the detail that lays behind that statement. But in the report, I'm sorry to be tardy, but it says something. You've given me its response, but it's the detail that feathers beneath that. I don't understand that.
Okay,
detail because it's not in the report.
We've got another explanation.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to confirm, actually, that's a definition, and actually none of our findings or overall report has come in as limited. We've actually come in as reasonable. So what internal audit will do is carry out the full audit, and following the recommendations, they didn't do a final assessment of what our rating should be. And we've actually been rated as reasonable in terms of our procurement processes. So the limited aspect, there isn't anything in the report that says it's got a limited rating. It's just the definition that if we were rated limited, it'd be because of that rationale, but we haven't actually had a rating that's been rated limited.
Thank you for the additional information.
That's great. Thank you very much. Any question on that piece? Do you want to move on?
Thank you. So the next paper is Appendix D, which is on page 81, and this is relating to the Portfolio Management Office Assurance Review. A project management process has been introduced by authority, which led to the creation of the Portfolio Management Office in April 2021. And the purpose is to ensure projects are managed consistently and to aid project managers in delivering projects on time, on budget, and to desired standards. So the PMO are responsible for ensuring that all projects within the authority are initiated, executed, and closed in a consistent and structured manner. The audit evaluated 6 key risk areas, which are listed on your report, on your pack on page 84, which are the effectiveness of the PMO, project initiation and approval, implementation and delivery, costs and benefits, risk management, and monitoring and reporting. Again, the overall conclusion for this review was reasonable. We raised 4 medium and 2 low priority findings. The key findings related to KPIs again for the PMO itself, the standardization of the project process and approval of budget increases within projects. I will pause there for any specific questions you may have relating to this report.
Questions? Appears not. Thank you for that piece. There's a recommendation, isn't it?
Yes, Chairman, on page 23.
Go back a bit.
Yeah, and this is the final audit reports for financial year 21-22 be noted, and this relates to the 4 reports that have been considered in open session. And Selina will be staying online to cover the exempt audit at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
So for the time being, it's that these 4 audit reports are noted, Chairman.
Agree with that?
Agree.
We wanted 11, is it?
7B.
Yep.
Same place. Right,
Yep.
same again.
Thank you. This next paper is to update members on the progress of the implementation of our audit recommendations, and this is an update position as at the 14th of February date. I just want to highlight to members that on page 99, so that front cover, make reference to a verbal update being presented in November 22. This is an error, as this should be noting today's date. Our lead auditor, Alex, is responsible for liaising with all the audit action owners periodically, and his role is to ensure that progress is being made to fully implement the agreed audit actions for each review we undertake. So we currently have, at the moment, 12 actions that are past their agreed implementation date and 2 are in progress. On page 102 of your packs, we provide a detailed report of those actions that are past their due date. I'll pause there for any questions relating to the detailed overdue actions, if there are any.
Any questions? Robin?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, there are 1 or 2 essential priorities in, without listing them particularly, which are high priority in red, and finishing on actions about stock and equipment. Would that be because there is deterioration of equipment, it is replacing, or is that, I don't believe it's because we've lost equipment, and some of the other findings which are in red are all on stock record and stuff which are assets that we need to ask for. And I'd imagine, beg your pardon, look, I should imagine it's because some assets should wear out and deteriorate,
Yeah.
and they have to be recorded in the audit. But it does show it in red, so it must be that there's an inability to actually account for some of it somewhere. Doesn't mean it's gone missing, it's probably just worn out.
Simon, I believe you've got an answer.
Thanks for that question, Councillor. Yes, regretfully, this project, the work that was undertaken following the audit has sort of moved, as you can see, into Q1 of this year.
Yeah.
The primary reason for that is because the scanners that we wanted to purchase to make the process improvement were ordered, and then they arrived in October time. And if you think about the Omicron wave, then I mean the face-to-face training which we needed to do with all of our sites was kind of delayed on that, and then all the process stuff that we wanted to improve after we've got the hardware right has subsequently has slipped. But the work is ongoing and it's in for Q1 this year.
Well, thank you very much, Simon, for that through the chair. I thought that was the case, but as it's showing there, not to ask it, would be negligent.
I was just going to add to that point, just to give further assurance, we still do have that asset management mapping piece of work that we are undertaking. So again, that will give you the assurances on the progress that's been made and what that process looks like with the new scanners. And again, we'll have the final report for that at the next committee meeting.
Thank you much for that. It's okay on that piece.
Yeah, Chairman, the recommendation is on page 99, and that is that the progress on implementation of recommendations be noted.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Move on to the next one.
Thank you. So this next paper sets out the internal audit strategy and the proposed internal audit plan for the year 22-23. The Buckinghamshire Council Business Assurance Team is responsible for implementing the Fire Authority's internal audit strategy through delivery of work programmes in accordance with the agreed service level agreement. This paper details the internal audit strategy for the year and the proposed internal audit plan for the committee to approve. The Accounts and Audit Regulation states that the Fire Authority must undertake an effective internal audit to evaluate the effectiveness of its risk management, control and governance processes, taking into account public sector internal audit standards or guidance. Proper internal audit practices are defined in the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards 2017. This strategy sets out our approach for the delivery of the internal audit plan and how we will approach each audit assignment. We have a partnership with the Apex audit framework hosted by the London Borough of Croydon. This partnership arrangement includes an element of a call-off contract should it be necessary to outsource specific technical audits such as IT and any complex contract audits that we may have on the plan. The key part of the strategy is to ensure right skill mixes and resource exist to deliver an effective service. For 22-23, the internal audit plan, we will aim to continue in the resource we allocate for each assignment. An audit manager will oversee the programme of work, ensuring work is delivered on time and to the correct quality. And we will continue to present to the quarterly plans and progress to this committee. And subsequently, qualified and experienced auditors will be allocated to each audit assignment. On Appendix A, page 12, we set out the draft internal audit plan, which has been drafted for the approval for the committee and has been developed in consultation with the Senior Management Board and consideration of the Fire Authority's corporate plan, strategic risks and previous audit activity. I will pause there for any specific questions relating to the strategy and the proposed audit plan.
Any questions? Robin?
Just a slight question. Can clarity around, I can't think of page 111, whatever it is on here. There's two NAs and it says contingency in corporate work. The explanation in there is fine, but just some clarity around why it's NA and between that, of course, it says ongoing for general, just some clarity around that, so I understand what we mean by that.
Yeah, not a problem at all. So contingency is just a number of days that we've allocated to against the audit plan should a new risk or audit area be identified by the organisation for the Fire Authority. So we continue to have regular meetings with the Director of Finance and Assets, and through those discussions we identify any new key risk or emerging areas that might want to be considered for inclusion in the plan for during the year. So essentially we set aside a number of days that we can then go in and do that particular piece of work should it be needed. With regard to and therefore we can't give a risk assessment because we don't know what order we might be looking at. It is just should it emerge in the year. With regard to the corporate work and why that's not applicable, again, what we call corporate work is our attendance to management meetings, our presence to the committee, and our meetings and liaisons with officers, again, through development of the plan and continuous understanding of what's going on with the organisation. So we're set aside as an audit team to be available to have those meetings and discussions. And again, it's not a risk assessment, it's more allocating days in terms of resource from our side as a team, hence why we don't risk assess that.
Thank you very much. Well, it's got 10 days in there, and I mean, if I don't ask where there's nothing in there, it wouldn't be right with it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Any more on that one?
Chairman, yeah, the recommendation for this paper is on page 109, and it's that the progress on the annual internal audit plan be noted.
Agreed.
Agreed, everybody?
Agreed.
Move on to D.
Oh, apologies, I think I missed one paper there. I gave you the strategy instead of the plan, didn't I?
Okay.
Yes, I went the wrong way around. So I'll just go back to C, so it's 7C here, which is on page 109 of your packs. Apologies for that.
Sorry, in that case, sorry, Selina, in that case, I should probably put the recommendation to 7D if that's the paper you
Do that now, yeah.
And that's that the members note the internal audit strategy and approve the annual internal audit plan, because that was a paper for approval.
Agree?
Thank you, Selina.
Thank you.
So the last one will be brief, 7C, which is just an update against the plan. So the audits, this is just a position where we are for delivering the 21-22 audit plan. Just summarising on page 111 of your packs, the progress that we've made, and it's highlighting that we have completed 5 audits out of the approved 7. One is the asset management system process mapping where field work is completed. However, we're just finalising the report, and we have the one audit, HR and payroll process mapping, which in agreement with the Director of Finance and Asset, we have agreed to defer as they're new officers within that service. So we will undertake that review in Q1. And I'll pause there for any questions on our progress.
Any questions? Okay, I'm letting it Robin.
I was hoping somebody else would ask a question.
No, it's we're impressed by the obviously the officer, so it's all great.
Impressed.
We are impressed.
And I'm always impressed.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. That paper in essence was for noting, that's been noted already.
Okay.
And Selina will be staying online to join us at the end of the meeting.
Well, can I apologise for all that hard work you put in there? It's quite a subject, and you've done really, really well. I think we all agree on that one.
Yes, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Item 11. Stuart. Bound. Stuart.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is the regular report on the status of our corporate risks, which we present to every meeting of this committee. The report at pages 267 to 284 of your papers reflects any changes and updates made since this committee last met in November 2021. Since then, the risk register has been subject to regular review by officers at our performance monitoring and strategic monitoring boards, most recently at the 22nd of February SMB, and also by lead members where individual risks fall within their areas of reference. And those responsibilities are shown in the risk register as a specific column for that, which is pages 275 to 284 of your papers. As you will have seen from Appendix 2 at page 273, there have been some changes to the probability and impact scores and also RAG statuses of some of our risks since our last report to you in November. As you know, quite a lot has happened since then. The detailed evaluations and updates on the status of all the individual risks are at Appendix 3, which is pages 275 to 284. I will briefly overview these before referring back to the Chairman for any questions or comments that members may have. In doing so, I will also ask the relevant officer risk owners whether they have anything to add to what I have had to say in relation to each risk, as I appreciate some of these are very much live issues at the present time. So firstly, in relation to the staff availability risk, the evaluation for which is at pages 275 to 6, I can confirm that 17 new whole-time firefighter recruits joined us on the 1st of March and commenced training at the Fire Service College. However, we decided to maintain the current risk score and red RAG status for this risk in light of the potential impact of London Fire Brigade's current firefighter recruitment campaign. I'll just refer to Mick on this particular one, so you might have a bit more of an update for us.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Stuart. Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, just to assure members, we're monitoring the situation very closely around London Fire Brigade's recruitment campaign. We've got some anecdotal kind of evidence that we've had a number of people apply to go into London because I think, as we mentioned at the last full authority, with the London waiting, it's quite an attractive proposition for firefighters to transfer across. But we are in dialogue with London Fire Brigade as well to make sure that they don't take everybody all at once if those numbers do come to fruition. And we're also in dialogue with our training providers around additional recruit courses later in this year. So we are in, it says in here as well that we are setting up a recruitment board as well, so that we can maintain our recruitment momentum moving forward as well to cover any gaps that may appear if anyone does decide to join London Fire Brigade through their own recruitment campaign that they've launched. So we are monitoring it very closely, and as I say, we have measures put in place, and we are in dialogue with our training providers to make sure that they can facilitate any future courses that we may need to cover any shortfalls. But that's why we're maintaining the risk as high in that regard. But just to assure members that we are fully focused on this, and it's one of our key priorities moving forward around recruitment.
Robin.
Thank you. Just to touch on that though, base, I mean, I'm pleased that you're showing it quite rightly as a high risk. There is, I believe, an ongoing pressure through staffing, leaving, and we must recognise that recruiting to the college isn't full-time qualified firefighters. They're not qualified until they've done their training, so their numbers not fully qualified firefighters. So we have to quantify back what is the overall burden change on the daily work rate of our firefighters, because we have to manage that risk against what they can physically do and how many hours they can physically work. Because if this means that our present call firefighters are through recruitment elsewhere and inability to recruit are under immense strain, we all know it's a very high pressure job, we all know it's very responsible, and we all know that there's a limit to what an individual can do of hours. Can I have a figure about what sort of hours we are averaging for our full-time firefighters? Are they working beyond what's reasonable? And if they are, what measures can we do with all the external pressures for the London recruitment, plus the fact that we're recruiting trainee firefighters, which aren't necessarily qualified to do some of the jobs that full-time firefighters? I'm sorry if it's a tardy and difficult question, but it is very important that we establish what the risk is, because we have a duty here to be assured that A, our employees are not under extreme pressure, and they're likely to, under pressure, when you're under pressure, what happens is you can make mistakes which can affect your own well-being and more importantly, the people working around you and the job that you're doing. And lastly, if we can't do anything about that, what is the alternative if we're going to be running staff who are probably working far over their overtime rate, which is a reasonable thing for them to do? I'm sorry if it's a different question, but it's very important that we look after not only the safety of our staff and our firefighters, but by doing that, we're best looking after the safety of the population. I'm sure we're all in agreement on that.
Absolutely. Nick?
Yeah, we obviously have safeguards in place around working time, and we are probably still one of the only services that monitor all of the working time for all of our employees in the country. And just to give you some comfort, I've got the Health and Safety Committee meeting tomorrow, actually, that I chair. And we have a lead member that sits on that. And in the last year, I think we've only had 2 breaches of the working time regulations across the whole of the organisation. So we have safeguards in place through our resource management team to ensure that people do comply to working time regulations. So I haven't got the actual figure of what the average hours would be, but all of our whole-time firefighters are employed on a 42-hour week contract. And then there are additional shifts that would be available on the bank system for them to work. But as I say, that's closely monitored through the resource management team to ensure that there are no breaches of the time regulations. As I say, I think it's the last year there's only been 2 breaches, which were very minor anyway, and they were flagged immediately, and the individuals were informed that they were, if they were going to accept a shift, that they would be in breach. So it is monitored very, very closely, just to give you that assurance.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. I appreciate the candour and the responsible way you responded to it. But can we have a update or a note to us once you've managed to evaluate that, just to give us assurance that things aren't as terrible as they could be and that they are improving? Because we do have a responsibility to the things there. And I know you all take your jobs absolutely responsible, but our job is to ask questions about these matters. And if we didn't ask them at the appropriate time, we wouldn't be doing our job. And it's about supporting you, not causing you problems.
No, that's absolutely fine. And with regard to our establishment figures, because we've got the additional funding this year, we're looking to increase the amount of firefighters that we employ anyway. which will reduce the burden on any bank shifts that are being worked. So it sort of tips the balance back towards having less people doing overtime, as it were, than we currently have, because we will be increasing our establishment with the additional funding that we've got that will ensure the safety of not just our firefighters, but the public that we serve as well. So there's my assurance on that.
Have a question?
Yeah, I mean, you've already answered some of my question, but it was on a similar vein in terms of understanding how overtime is being used, and perhaps not for this meeting, but it'd be really useful before next week's meeting to have a real understanding. So we don't use opt-outs at all on working time.
Yes, we do have opt-outs on working time, but equally there are still other safeguards that are in place around, you know, the clear 24 hours and how many hours you can work in an aggregated period. So we still monitor, even the opt-outs we monitor, so that people can't exceed the opt-out, if you like.
Okay. So I think this is something we'll all want to, we raised it at the last meeting, didn't we? With the additional funding coming through, what is the optimal number of staff to have in order to ensure both the safety of the staff, but also the safety of our residents? So it'd be useful to have that further understanding of how many staff we have, how many opt-outs we have, what is the optimal number, how many hours are, as Robin asked, how many hours are our firefighters actually working on average. Obviously, every week will be a bit different, just to get a bit of an understanding of where, you know, when we're thinking about that extra resource, understanding how much of that needs to go into additional firefighters, how much will need to go into equipment. We've got to make some balances and hard choices next week, don't we?
Yeah, and as I say, and just on that, we did increase our establishment 2 years ago by an additional 10 firefighters that reduced that burden again, and it is purely voluntary. You know, we don't require anybody to do any additional hours on top of their contracted hours.
I appreciate that, but voluntary when you've got, I mean, one of the great thing about your team is how dedicated they are to public safety. They'll feel an internal pressure to volunteer if they know there's going to be a gap in service if they don't. Yeah.
I think Mick,
So you say volunteer.
No, so we're all accepting that. So Mick, you're going to
No, that's absolutely fine. I can work that out. But as I say, yeah, the additional firefighters that we put in is the more we put in, the less we rely on any additional shifts being worked.
Yes.
And as you say, it's that balance of you know, sort of how many additional firefighters we can put in with the additional funding that we've got, that we've been campaigning for.
Yes. Additional question.
Yeah, my question is, trying to understand the limiting point to recruitment. Is it the amount of officers we can physically train, or is it a restriction on the budget in terms of how we actually put our recruitment campaigns out, the media channels that we put them out? Is there a, you know, what is the limiting factor in terms of recruitment?
It's probably a mixture of all of those things. The limiting factor in the past has always been around budgets and not knowing, because we've never had a longer term sort of financial settlement. It's always been difficult to actually plan for when to recruit, because of not knowing what resources that we would have in place. With this year though, because with the additional funding, we can plan a little bit better, and so we will be. So we're in dialogue now with our training provider for an additional course later in the year, and probably one into early next year as well. And then again, as you said, some of the limiting factors are around the amount of instructors that we have and the human resource element of that, of the additional burden on them, because so recruitment campaigns do take up a lot of resource. But we have established a new recruitment board that's going to be meeting in the next couple of weeks, and we've got a lead member on that as well to help drive some of that forward. So there are a number of limiting factors. However, we're confident that, you know, with the momentum that we've got and the additional funding, that, you know, we'll be able to fulfil those places as we move forward.
No, that sounds positive. Thank you.
Does sound
Thanks for the question.
Brilliant. Stuart.
Thank you, Chairman. So that moves us on to the funding and savings risk, pages 277 to 8. You will see that here we have lowered the risk score and RAG status in light of the authority's decision in February to raise the council tax preset by £5. However, it's only been reduced from red to the top end of the amber spectrum, as there are still some uncertainties in relation to central government funding. And there is, of course, the impact of growing inflationary pressures to consider, which are already manifesting themselves in terms of increasing costs for things like energy, fuel, and other consumables. And I'll perhaps just pass over to Asif, our Deputy Director of Finance and Assets, just perhaps to bring us up to date with that one as well.
No, thank you, Stuart. Yeah, in terms of, as members will be aware, in February, we obviously approved the £5 increase in precept, which was great news for the authority. Obviously, an additional 1.1 million in terms of our funding, but it would be remiss of us to not think of all the other issues that are arising, and inflation is a key area for us, and how will that impact the pay awards, for example. So currently, we've already projected a 2% in our NTFP, with inflation being at just over or just under 5.5%. Anything above 2%, we've not budgeted for in terms of pay award. So immediately, how would we go to kind of mitigate that? Would be probably looking to use our reserves in the coming years, but then over the medium-term financial plan, we'll have to kind of look at our budgeting in the long run to kind of mitigate that if there isn't any additional funding to kind of support that in future years. So yes, the risk has reduced from red to amber, but there are other pressures that are kind of materializing over the next few years that we've got to kind of pay attention to and try and mitigate the best that we can.
Robin.
It may be not possible, but I think that fuel prices, we know, are going up, and we haven't got any control where they're heading. Has the government indicated, as we are a key service, and I say important strategic service to protect the population, whether the government would get involved in doing some purchase of fuels and that for us to try to mitigate some of that cost in the short term? Because if we're going on the market and we would always have, I know previously you have quite a lot of fuel in stock, which you bought at the cheaper rate. The reality is, when we come to replace that stock in the coming period, it's going to be difficult to place. Has the government indicated to us whether they're going to use their scale of purchase? It would be prudent, wouldn't it, of a government to think that the national well-being of the services across the nation, and they will purchase for the military, and they will purchase for everyone else. This is an extraordinary time we're heading into. It would be, I worked in agriculture, which didn't actually have a working time directive. We could work as many hours as we were allowed to breathe. And if we kept on breathing, we could work tomorrow. But I do think it would be worth approaching. Well, we should approach our collection of members of parliament to ask whether they put any thought to that matter, because I do think we should ask that question, because the military won't be paying the same price we will. They won't be paying the levy of tax that we'll be paying from VAT and stuff that we're going to have to pay on our fuel. And there must be somewhere in that, because surely keeping people's houses more safe would be a priority for the government. We gave the government support during the pandemic. Our firefighters and staff have done nothing more than that. Think a little bit backward. Could I suggest that we write to them to see if they're having any considerations around purchasing, because it would be a good thing for them to do, and it seems a logical thing to do in extremely difficult times. But then perhaps I'm just a little old-fashioned. I believe in everything as a whole. So we'll just see. Can I propose that we do that?
Nick, where do we go from this one?
I'm aware that the Chief Officer has got a meeting with the local MPs coming up in the next couple of weeks. I'll contact the Chief Officer after this meeting.
Can you do that?
If you want me to come along and help, I'm always.
No, it's a good question.
I mean, I'm sure they'd enjoy that.
So there's a meeting with the MPs in the pipeline.
There is one in the diary for the next couple of weeks, so I'll mention it to the Chief.
Bring that up there.
I suggest that we flitter this question in front of them, because it's always, anyone who's been to Westminster, it's a very cloudy atmosphere down there. And if anyone visited the facilities in there, you'll see that it's a very male-orientated building as well. So I think that it would be just to suggest to them that they could look at this. You never know, they may take it up.
Anyway, so there's a meeting in the diary. Thanks for that, and that'll be asked. And so, okay, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair.
I'll take that as an action for speak to the Chief Officer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll just turn us now to the information security risk at pages 279 to 280. Viruses and malware remain a very live and potent risk to information, communication and operating systems, and ever more so in light of current events. And obviously, probably many of you have seen the advice from GCHQ's National Cybersecurity Centre in relation to the potential for Russia to use this medium to hit back at countries that have deployed economic sanctions and other trade-related measures in response to its invasion of Ukraine. We have yet to see anything directly attributable to this source here in the UK. But shortly after Japan announced a package of support for Ukraine and measures against Russia, one of Toyota's key suppliers was hit by a suspected cyber attack, resulting in the suspension of operations at 14 domestic plants on March 1st. That output accounts for about a third of their global production. So it's quite a big hit, adding obviously to the existing supply chain problems in the motor industry. And obviously what they're looking for are weak areas that they can go for. So obviously that's not certain, but the Japanese government are currently investigating to see if there are any linkages to Russian actors in relation to that. Obviously, we continue to do everything we can to protect the authority's systems, and you will have seen from the risk update that we are now a subscriber to something called SegWalk, which I won't spell out in full, but it's in your papers, and that allows us to share knowledge, resources and benchmarking amongst participating IT security specialists and IT managers. I'll just turn to Graham as well, perhaps just to add to what I've said as he oversees this particular risk.
Thank you, Stuart. The only other gloss I would add is, as also set out on page 280, we are plugged in to the notification system that's run by the National Cyber Security Centre, and indeed we were notified of a cyber risk on the 18th of January, and that's set out in the narrative there for you. As Councillor Stutchbury says, we are living in extraordinary times, so one of the measures we've got in place now is that our ICT manager is the single point of contact for the Home Office and for the Cabinet Office in terms of receiving any further alerts on cyber risk due to the circumstances in Ukraine and Russia. Thank you, Stuart.
Robin.
Thank you, and I thank you for the recognition, which I think we all feel at the moment. We are in extraordinary times, and I thought when I was a young man that times would get better. It hasn't actually proven. We've gone back to what it was, and I think we are all got to buckle in and see how we move forward together as well on this, because clearly Vladimir Putin is got his issues, hasn't he? And unfortunately he decided to bring them to the rest of us. He better really have kept them inside a cabinet that was part of the basket, wouldn't it? And instead of putting the rest of the world through it. But
that's right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Is that it, Robin?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that.
A question. It's great we're doing all this preventative stuff, because I think that's really important.
Yeah.
We never let it happen. But sometimes the worst case happens and our systems go down. What is the recovery time for complete failure of our systems? Is there a backup plan and have we identified a recovery period? How many days would it be before we got our systems back up?
Okay.
All right.
Oh, yeah. The backup plan.
It varies from system to system. So what we have done is gone through our systems and graded them from essential, as in we try to get them back as quickly as possible. That generally focuses on mobilising systems, so anything operationally, and then we work down the list. We had an issue 2-3 years ago, and it took us a week to get everything back, and we started getting systems back within 24 hours.
A week?
In total, yes, from end to end. Because we now externally host a number of our systems, we do hope that we would never have everything taken out, because our finance system is hosted with one provider, our premises risk management system is hosted with another provider, our HR system is hosted with another company. So we reduce that risk of having everything wiped out in one go.
It sounds like there's still a bit of uncertainty, because we can never know the nature of an attack, and that remains quite a risk, I would say.
It's a tricky one, because, like you say, you don't know what's coming. And we have business continuity and plans in place. Probably the last test was COVID. but that didn't actually test our data. We are still in talks around how we test switching everything off one day, as in metaphorically test switching everything off, and then seeing how we come back from that and how people behave.
Right. Robin?
We've said in extensive times, what is the advice we're getting from Whitehall in the sense what their predictions are of this? Because if anyone listens to the conversations in committees and stuff in Parliament, they do a lot of talking about all this stuff. Is there any recommendations? Have they put any contingency in place, and have they actually done what you would do in these extreme times, is to put some firewall in to protect us all from this? Because you know, it's important. We're not in isolation. We're any one part of this country is not in isolation. We are all together. So they have a responsibility. Have they said it's something we could ask?
This is quite a broad question, so I think we're limited at the moment. But I'm sure any information which of any change in the future will come back to us anyway.
Add that to the list of questions for our the meeting with these.
The MP, yes.
I
think they're very open to talking with us.
They are quite comfortably well paid, so let's give them something to do.
All right, that's another question for MPs. Thank you. Stuart.
Thank you. So I'll just move us on to the COVID resurgence risk, which is at pages 281 to 2. We have been progressively restoring services that were paused or restricted due to COVID, subject to maintenance of appropriate controls to avoid transmission to the public or amongst our own staff, and obviously also to provide reassurance to the public as well, particularly where we're dealing with vulnerable groups. Given the government's relaxation of the various legal control measures and in general reducing absence levels, we have lowered the impact score for this risk, putting it at the lower end of the amber rank spectrum now. I've got Simon sat next to me here who actually looks after that risk specifically, and he'll just perhaps give you a little update on more recent developments.
Thank you. I'm clear before it properly this time, sorry. Yeah, so we have lowered the impact on this one. I think that's largely down to the vaccination programme. What we're seeing with our staff previous to vaccination, our biggest concern was around their ongoing welfare, and we were seeing people on for absence for an extended period of time. But we're running absence around between 3% and 6%. I mean, as of today, 4% is COVID related, so it does have an impact on our service delivery, and it's something we have to closely monitor. But thankfully, we are seeing staff returning to the workplace within that sort of 7 to 10 day period because of the success of the vaccination programme. So that we've lowered the impact because staff are returning to the workplace well. But it is still a concern that we need to monitor, which is why we kept the probability up there.
Okay, actually,
just for variety.
Quickly.
Just over COVID and state policy and everything, that's no problem, because obviously I'm hearing that from different organisations, both in the public sector and private sector. Are you, because I've got organisations at the moment that have people that have been tested positive, and after 2 days, because they've been fit and well enough to come back to work, their employers are asking them to come into work, even though they know they're actually positive. That also, there's a challenge as well with obviously unvaccinated people from a point of view of the length of time they've been off currently. And I heard a story recently of a school who's actually got a COVID positive teacher currently teaching at the moment. From that point of view, I just wondered how you're handling that.
Yeah, no, thanks. That's a good question. So our current position, we've always followed the government and the NHS guidance, and to be fair, the 2 and a bit years that we've been dealing with this, it's served us well. And currently the guidance is don't go to work if you have COVID. So we've adopted the kind of the 5-7 day testing, and we've still got a good supply of lateral flow tests, which we encourage our staff to use. And if staff are well enough to work from home, we enable that. If they're not, we've got the absence and the wellbeing procedures in there, so we wouldn't expect our staff to come in with COVID.
Marvin.
Thank you. We are going to be with a lateral protest for some time, aren't we? And I remember my mother trying to tell me to stop putting things up my nose, and now I have to do it every day. Which is contrary to her advice. But I am seriously. I want to ask the question, and I'm sure the answer is yes. That when our firefighters and staff are necessarily having to be off because they're protecting the herd immunity, being this whole priority, they are fully paid and they wouldn't suffer any financial inconvenience through doing that, because that is one of the problems with this whole thing. In Ashley, we quite like to raise this issue about, and if you can tell me where that teacher is, I'm going to look at that. You know, this whole issue, because if we don't support people to be able to protect the staff, then you run a risk of it diminishing our ability to do it. It is a risk. And then the answer is going to be yes, but it's a question we have to ask.
Yes.
Yes, and the answer is yes. But the additional things that, so they would remain on pay for the short period that people are normally on COVID. But the other thing that we introduced at an early stage with during the pandemic was that the COVID absence would not contribute to their overall absence monitoring because during the pandemic. So yeah, all the arrangements have been in place.
I knew that was the case. I just know that we need to be very clear about this after listening to. Can you get me know where that score is, Ashley? I'll go now.
Okay. Stuart, any more on this?
Thank you. Just yes, finally,
Yeah.
Pages 283 to 4 is the latest position in relation to the McLeod Sergeant pensions risk. Here you will see that we've also reduced the score on life status from red to amber. That's mainly around our assessment. We think there's a reduced potential for a significant and immediate loss of staff. Obviously, you're close in the retirement bracket compared with when the remedy was introduced. Obviously, though, there are still financial liabilities there, of course, which is why we've obviously kept the risk still at a relatively high level. I might just pass on to Asif there, just if he has anything to add to that. Thank
you. Not a lot, to be fair. I think obviously we've had the immediate detriment framework, which was approved by the executive committee in November. So we've had a few cases come in since then, but it seems to kind of calm down now in terms of people looking to retire and stuff. We would have expected most people, if they were looking to go, probably go by the 31st of March this year, because from the 1st of April you transition to the new 2015 scheme. So we are expecting it to kind of probably slow down a bit, but what Stuart's alluded to, I guess the bigger risk is probably the financials in the coming years, and what that leads to in terms of employer contributions in the future, because they get reassessed sort of every 4 years. And obviously the last assessment was based on a number of people moving on to the 2015 scheme, which has now been kind of reversed back to 1992. So that's something that we're looking at as part of the medium-term financial plan and looking to build that in again to mitigate that risk as best as we can.
Okay. That's it. Okay. Stuart?
Thank you.
Fine.
No, that's it from me.
Graham?
In that case, Chairman, the recommendation.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to put on record again that I think it's remiss of us not to have floods and climate change on this list.
Okay, thank you.
I second that, because we did discuss it
I know, but we didn't win the vote.
We didn't win the vote, but yeah, but we could just keep mentioning it till it actually floods through and actually causes it to come onto the paperwork.
Thank you. Right.
Yeah, the recommendations are on page 267 as follows: that the status on identified corporate risks at Annex C be reviewed and approved. And secondly, that comments be provided to officers for consideration and attention in future update reports. And obviously the second recommendation is still live, so if any members wish to contact Stuart or any of the team directly to flag any issues, that can be facilitated.
Great. Rich. Thank you. Right, 12. Stuart.
Thank you. That brings us on to the statement of assurance.
Yes.
So the requirement to produce these was introduced back in 2012 with the Fire and Rescue National Framework for England, and that requirement was again reconfirmed most recently in the 2018 framework. The format and the content of the statement is based on government guidance, which was published in 2013. That's shown in Appendix 2, which is pages 305 to 311 in your pack. The guidance has not been updated since then, so it still remains extant. As you'll have seen, the statement covers the period April 2020 to March 2021, so it probably all feels like rather old news now in many cases, given all that's happened since. Not least, of course, the round 2 HMIC FRS inspection and the outcome thereof, which was reported to the Fire Authority in February. So the statement itself only signposts to this as set out in Appendix 1 at Section 142, which is page 292. Substantive coverage of the round 2 inspection will therefore be included in the 21-22 statement. So this time next year or sooner if we can manage it. However, you will see that the outcome of the HMI CFRS COVID inspection, which was undertaken in November 2020 and reported to this committee in March of last year, is included in Section 6 of the statement, which is at page 300 of your papers. Also, in a few minutes, Simon will also be giving you an update on our progress with the HMI CFRS improvement plan. Normally, we try and get these statements to you in the November meeting of this committee. However, we were unable to do so for this financial year due to the timing of the completion of the external audit of our financial statements, which you obviously considered earlier on in the meeting. The statement of assurance is very much the last link in the governance chain and therefore cannot be finalised until all the other inputs are in. Pretty much everything in the statement has been considered before by this committee, so it really only serves as a précis and overview of the outcomes of the more detailed underlying assurance activities ranging across the financial, governance and operational functions and processes that were reported to this committee during the course of the 2020 to 21 financial year. You will see updated positions relative to the previous year's statement are shaded in grey. These include the outcomes from assurance activities and internal and external auditors' opinions in relation to finance and governance. You will also see that we provided hyperlinks to the more detailed reports referenced in the document. Obviously, some of these will require updating to include the external audit that was considered in this meeting today. So essentially, it functions as a dashboard covering the span of pretty much all key assurance work undertaken during the year in question. I don't propose to take you through the fine detail of the statement, but I'm happy to take any questions that you might have before you consider the recommendation in the cover paper at page 285. Robin.
Happy to consider the recommendation. Thank you, Stuart, for the work you've done on this. Just one short question. The correlation between the statement and the fire, Magistrate Inspector of Fire, that will correlate with the next report, will it not? And then we can marry the two things together. We don't need to rehearse those statements here, but we do need to know that you'll marry the two things together in your next report. Would that be correct?
Absolutely, I will, yes.
Thank you very much, Stuart.
Thank you.
Any more questions, Ralph?
So observation, Chairman, just to say that I think the statement fulfills its purpose of meeting the government requirement. It's fine, it's good.
Good point. Okay, happy with that, Stuart?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. As Stuart indicated, the recommendation is at 285 and it's as follows: that the 2020-21 statement of assurance be approved for signature by the Chairman of the Overview and Audit Committee and the Chief Fire Officer.
Great.
Great.
Thank you. Item 13. Mark.
Thank you. Today I'm presenting you with the Treasury Management Performance Report 21-22 quarter 3. The accrued interest earned for this period is 30k, which is 7.5k higher than the budget set for the same period. Therefore, the Fire Authority has achieved the budget set for the full financial year by the end of quarter 3 and is projecting to achieve in the region of 38,000 in interest in total by the end of the financial year. In terms of investments, as at December 30th of December 2021, the Fire Authority had 16.5 million invested in various counterparties, including banks, building societies, money market funds, and current accounts. It is anticipated by the end of March 2022, the funds invested will be in the region of 14 million plus the current account balance, so approximately 15 to 16 million. The reason for the slight reduction in the investments are due to 2 deals that are maturing, one that matured at the end of February and one that's going to be mature at the end of March. And this is to pay our short-term expenditure requirements. As you can see from the investment chart, which I think is on 316 of your packs, 15 packs, we have deals that are maturing on a frequent basis, and this again is to meet our short-term expenditure requirements. Moving on to borrowing, in May 2022, the Fire Authority has a PWLB loan that's due to be repaid, and the value of this loan is 620,000. I've already made plans to ensure that we have cash available to repay this loan when it's due, and I must add this does not impact our revenue budgets. As I mentioned, the authority has managed to achieve the budget set for the year of 30,000, and is any interest that we've been earned during Q4 will be greatly welcome. It's around 8,000. In terms of next financial year, at the Fire Authority meeting held in February, members approved the Treasury strategy for 22-23, and this strategy had no significant changes compared to strategy for this financial year. Yes, the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee did increase the base rate in February to 0.5%. However, the investment income budget set for 22-23 will remain at 30k. The next review date of the base rate is actually tomorrow. I'm not sure what's going to happen there. It could stay, could go increase, who knows? We'll find out tomorrow. But the main reason for us remaining with the 30k budget is due to us having deals that were done previously before the 2 base rate increases. So we won't see the full benefit for the full year of the interest going up. As you can see on page, I think it's a benchmarking table on page 316, I'm not sure. It shows that the blue bar is the actual interest rates, average interest rate we've earned. And you can see by the green line, which is the base rate, which is now higher in December. So you can see that our actuals are less than the base rate, and that's a good comparison there for you guys to look at. Any additional budget, any additional income set above the budget. Sorry, I'll start again. Any additional income above the set budget will be welcome, and if the investment income is sustainable for future years, we will then reflect this as part of the next medium-term financial plan. Finally, I will continue to monitor the cash flow position on a regular basis, so the authority can meet the short-term expenditure requirements and maintain adequate liquidity. Happy to take any questions.
Robin.
2 questions. One, why are we paying the loan off in its entirety? Is that because it's good business sense to get rid of that loan? Because it seems strange to want to pay a large sum. The second one's a bit of a flippant remark, really. We all have bank accounts and all sign members and code of conduct and interest. If we got a bank account with any of these people, should we declare it? Or does it not matter because we're only here in a peculiarly non-fiscal issue? Because I've got a Lloyds Bank account, and Lloyds Bank is maybe have people, members, councillors particularly may have interest in some of these things. Should we declare that? I only say it because Monday I was looking at those sort of things on Monday, and it's still kicking around my head. That's a flippant question, but the real question in it is about what paying it off so quick.
If I can just come in for that one. In terms of paying it, it's actually coming to its maturity. So we would have taken this loan out several years ago with the plan to pay it off after it comes to its end. So it's actually coming to an end. So the way our loans work is we take out a loan, and every year we pay an interest element, and in the final year when the loan is due back, we pay that final payment. So it's the end of the loan, so we're due to pay it back.
Thank you. Just I thought that if interest rates are rising, that's the cheaper borrowing than we can do somewhere else. That's all. Thank you very much for the explanation. I wish I had that amount of money to pay a loan off. Period. If I did, I'd have a really good party first.
Okay.
And sorry, the second bit, I'm not aware of you having to declare yourself. I don't believe you have to declare yourself.
Good question to ask then.
Yeah. Okay. Another question?
My question's about investment strategy, just a bit more understanding on that. So all the counterparties are fairly low risk, which probably makes sense. But within these low risk counterparties, there are probably some that perform better than others. So I wonder, is a strategy to have a greater number of these counterparties to protect ourselves from risk, or should we be looking at the better performers and investing more into these performers? So I just wonder if there's what thinking is going behind how we choose a counterpart.
I can answer that. So with our counterparties, we can only invest a maximum of 5 million or 30% of our total portfolio with one counterparty. So essentially, we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. So that covers us in that sense. The second part to that is we speak to various brokers that we deal with, and when we speak to them on the phone, they give us a good rate, and in terms of who's performing better than the other banks or building societies, and then we look to see whether we've got the capacity to be able to deal with them. We also have treasury advisors that we meet on a regular basis to discuss what kind of rates that are happening in the market and what's going on in terms of within the UK and also outside of the UK as well. So we do seek advice and reassurance that who we're investing with is low risk to the authority, and ensure that we can definitely get our money back once we've invested with those counterparties.
So it's good to know that we spread our risk, but when I look at the papers, I don't see how these individual counterparties are performing relative to each other. So I don't think the 5 million is used up in any particular counterparty. I think the most is maybe
it's 4.
So that particular one probably generates more money for us than the others. But are there any that are underperforming?
There's none underperforming, but what I can do is and when I produce the next report, I can add the ratings in there as well. If that would be more beneficial.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'll take it as an action.
That would be, yeah. Oh, okay. Any more on that? I think that's finished, Marcus. Okay with that?
In that case, Chairman, the recommendations on page 313 is as follows: that the Treasury Management Performance 2021-22 Q3 report be noted.
Agreed. Okay. Item 14, I believe it's on.
So this item introduces the revised HMIC FRS action plan following the round 2 full inspection report, which went to the February authority meeting. You'll see that the format has been refreshed, and that is to align to our portfolio management office programme register. You'll see that we've linked the improvement findings to existing projects and programmes wherever possible, and the vast majority of the findings do already fit into existing work or business as usual improvements. In future, the progress updates will draw directly from our PMO register, which will be a more efficient way for reporting. We've included a dashboard on this plan to give a top-level view of progress, and you'll see that at this early stage, we're already demonstrating progress against many of the findings, with 3 areas complete and 19 on track. The plan itself has been split into 3 tabs to reflect the inspection pillars of effectiveness, efficiency and people. We've also included a column as to whether the findings to be accepted by the authority. We're recommending that all the findings are accepted. There are a couple which we recommend to be partially accepted because of the way that those findings are written. We've also included a good practice tab, which we've extracted from the narrative of the report. We felt it was important not to lose sight of all the good work that's been done since the round 1 inspection. So we shared this idea with our service liaison lead, and they were quite enthused by that approach. So I've sent a copy of the action plan to the inspectorate before the deadline of the 7th of March, which was set out in the paper when the report was published. And I know that the chairman asked for a clear and simple plan. So I hope this plan achieves that aim. The other action that I had was that after this meeting, I'll circulate a copy of the plan to all of the authorities.
Really good. Yeah.
So is there any questions?
Any questions, Robin?
I can tell me what you want.
No, I'm fine. On your anyway, sort of a clear plan. Thanks for that, Simon. Any other questions, anyone? Okay.
In that case, Chairman, recommendation is at 319 that the committee notes the revised HMIC FRS BFRS improvement plan.
Agreed, everybody? Item 15, Simon.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the Grenfell Tower inquiry progress update and is being presented for noting. In summary, following the conclusion of the phase 1 of the inquiry, there were 46 recommendations made and we have incorporated them into an improvement plan. This plan is coordinated through the technical team and sponsored by the Head of Protection and Assurance. Of the 46 recommendations, we identified 45 actions, and to date, we've been able to complete 17, and we've made progress in 27, and that's as detailed in point 72 of the updated report. There is now only one recommendation waiting to be implemented, and that is responsible persons of high-rise residential building being required by law to include up-to-date information about persons with reduced mobility and their associated PEEPs, which are personal emergency evacuation plans, in the premises information box. The working group have been awaiting results on a formal consultation from the Home Office on legislative requirements for PEEPs before progress is made against the recommendation. This was received in January and progress will commence. The phase 2 part of the inquiry is currently ongoing. Many of the agreed modules have now concluded, with module 5 and module 6, which is firefighting closing statements, taking place on the 24th of January. Module 6, testing and government, is currently underway. It is anticipated there will be additional recommendations for fire and rescue services to review and action once the phase 2 report is published. As a service, we continue to be proactive in implementing the learning from the Grenfell Tower inquiry. This has been recognised in the HMICFRS report published in December. The inspectorate team found that the service has responded positively and proactively to the lessons learned from this tragedy, highlighting that the service delivered the high-rise audit programme ahead of schedule and suggested we were well positioned to improve our information about high-risk fire.
Yes.
No question. I just wanted to put on record a huge thank you to the team for how well they've been working with Milton Keynes Council. I'm sure Bucks will have a similar thing, but I really appreciate the collaborative. I think there's a good working relationship between the two.
Yeah.
And when we talk about partners, I think councils are a key part because of building control and our own stock. But I just wanted to say thank you. You know, I think that's worked really, really well. And I think certainly in Milton Keynes, I feel quite confident that we've taken the steps that we need to make sure that all of our high-rise buildings are getting to the right place. Thank you.
Robin.
I also want to thank you for what you're doing. With making a note that it seems to be in public life, all these inquiries, when it comes to people from our backgrounds, it's taken an awful long time to come to a conclusion, a satisfactory conclusion and proportion responsibility 2017 to 2022. And we're still having to talk about some of which any reasonable person would have thought would have been dealt with and with some short shrift and done. Now, whether that's legal considerations or what, I don't know. I'm an ordinary chap, and it seems to me that we shouldn't, you know, you'd hope by now we'd be implementing stuff with recommendations from the government on this, not still following the chain to where we are. But we are where we are because we don't have the power. But thank you very much for your ongoing report, and I'm sure that with house prices, we'll probably end up having a lot more high-rise things in the future because economics is probably going to predict that's the way we go.
Anyway, thank you.
I'll make sure the team hear that. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Recommendation on page 333, Chairman, and that's that the report is noted.
Agreed. Everybody agreed. Thank you. Forward plan. Noted.
Yes, Chairman, that's just for noting.
Okay.
Yeah, you might just want to make a note to before we go into the exempt session of the date of the next meeting, which is
you've got the date of the next meeting, the 20th of July 2022 at 10 o'clock.
And now, Chairman, I'll put the recommendation to the committee about excluding the press and public. It is recommended that the press and public be excluded from the meeting by virtue of paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act as the appendix contains information relating to the financial or business affairs of a person, including those of the authority, and on these grounds it is considered that the need to keep information exempt outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. That's the recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
I think that's agreed. We'll just stop the recording and then invite Selina Harlock back into the meeting.